Again, thank you very much for joining us. Another producer that I'm a huge fan of. The vast majority of my collection at home is von Buhl. So delighted to be tasting these wines again. And for those of you who don't know, Averys has such a long connection with von Buhl. Mimi recently found some wine lists dating from the 1930s that contained wines from von Buhl. So that's our earliest printed record, but I'm sure we were stocking wines from long before there. Yeah. And it's amazing to still have these connections, and it's great that you've taken part and joined in on our first virtual celebration of wine event. For those of you who had tickets, we were expecting to do a dinner here in our cellars with Monica back in March, which then got pushed back to September, which has now been pushed back to, but we will be rearranging that as and when we can, because I mean, I am probably one of the world's biggest fans of Riesling.
Okay, fantastic.
You should have mentioned it, Frank. You should have mentioned.
Probably didn't know that already. So big, exciting tasting coming up here. So I'm going to shut up and stop talking about Germany and Riesling, and over to you, Monica.
Thank you very much, Frank, for the introduction and the warm words. And thank you for always waving the Riesling and the von Buhl flags in Bristol. So I'm very much aware of that and always thankful for it. And I will be back in person. Miss you all, guys, and looking forward to our wine dinner and the next tastings and so on. But it's fantastic that you organized the virtual wine tasting, so we can work with the virtual tasting during the time before we meet each other again in person. So Reichsrat von Buhl, Frank already said. First grape variety, of course, what comes to your mind is Riesling, definitely. So founded 1849, and from the beginning, one of the very famous Riesling estates in the world. You said also the connection to Averys, which is fantastic. Mimi showed me the wine list, one of the first tastings I attended in the cellars of Averys, and I was really like, it's history coming out of these old wine lists, and it's a really long connection, and von Buhl is one of these traditional houses. 19th century, of course, the big time for German wines in general and for Riesling especially, and the most expensive and exclusive wines in that time has been Rieslings. So, and we are in the lucky position, we are in Pfalz. We have the perfect soil, we have the terroir, we have the climate for it. So that's the first connection, Riesling. Definitely we have 62 hectares, 80% is Riesling, but we also have some small amounts of Sauvignon Blanc, a little bit Chardonnay, some noble sweet grape varieties like Scheurebe. And our red wine is Pinot Noir. So we will taste then from the red wine section, the Pinot Noir. And yeah, Riesling as the still wine is well known worldwide, I'm proud to say. But what is not so well known is Méthode Champenoise, traditional bottle fermented Sekt. Bubbles made of Riesling grapes, and I think I might need a sip. So, you all have the bottles, right? So Reichsrat von Buhl Riesling Sekt, brut. BA, by the way, BA means from a certain distinction, from a certain area. So it's a quality sign that all grapes have to be from our region. The word Sekt, by the way, is a little bit tricky because it means German sparkling from all different quality ranges. Sekt can also be a tank fermented cheaper product, and it can be the bottle fermented, long lease stored champagne method top sparkling. So it's all called Sekt. The only way you can see how the Riesling is, or how the Sekt is made, is the word traditional bottle fermentation in Germany, traditionelle Flaschengärung. So if it's mentioned traditional bottle fermentation, then you can be sure it's the proper way of producing the Sekt. Why Riesling grapes? Why a sparkling with Riesling grapes? Of course, we have also Pinot Sekt, like the Reserve Brut. We also have a Rosé Sekt from Pinot Noir. But for us, Riesling Sekt is more like the business card. It's the signature sparkling, because in our region, Riesling, and in our winery, Riesling is the #1 grape variety. So for us, it was a natural thing to pick Riesling grapes for the sparkling, for the top sparkling range. Should we taste a little bit?
I already have. It's delicious. Not biased at all, of course.
It is very interesting when the first impression in the nose is champagne, because of the long yeast storage, the long duration on lees. It's 20 months in the bottle for the second fermentation, and that autolysis, that yeast storage, the toastiness, the brioche notes you find, it's one of the first impressions. Then also a little bit peach, a little bit lime, because of the grapes. I don't have to spit that. At that time, it's Friday night, the bars are closed. Cheers. On the palate, you find that tension between the creamy start, the creamy nose, and right in the end, you get that kick of the acidity of the Riesling grapes, of the freshness, of the lemon touch of the grape aromas. So that's exactly what we wanted to have, because I think it's quite unique, having that combination of creaminess and fresh and fruity aromas. It's dosage brut, which means it's really it could be extra brut as well. So it's 5.6 gram sugar level, residual sugar. But brut for us, it's the classic labeling and the classic dosage for a Riesling Sekt.
How long does it stay on the lees?
20 months.
20 months.
20 months. So you have the first fermentation for the base wines in the cellars. The grapes for the sparklings always are a little bit earlier picked than for the still wines, because you don't want to end up with too much alcohol after the first fermentation. So you have the base wine, early picked healthy grapes. You wouldn't take botrytis or anything for sparkling grapes. And you need a certain aroma profile and a physiological ripeness in the grapes, but you want to have enough acidity for the second fermentation, which is the backbone then for the second fermentation. And also, the more sugar level the grapes have, natural sugar level the grapes have, the higher is the alcohol, because the first fermentation goes right to the end. All grape sugar, all natural sugar is transformed into alcohol. And if you have a very late picked, high concentrated, overripe grape, you end up with 13%, 14% alcohol. And then you start the second fermentation. So you would have then like port wine with bubbles. Nobody wants to have that. So that's the reason why you need to pick the grapes for the sparklings a little bit earlier, a little bit before, a week or so before the still wines, in very carefully transported, full bunch pressing, carefully soft pressing systems, special champagne presses we have in our winery. And then around January, February, when the first fermentation, it's partly stainless steel and partly used tonneau. So a little bit wood fermentation, but the main part is stainless steel. And then January, February, after that first fermentation, you go in the bottle, add a little bit yeast, add a little bit of liqueur for the second fermentation, and you wait 20 months before you then disgorge and close the bottle for the final for the market.
I'm really glad you're talking about sparkling Riesling, because I had the sparkling Riesling from Dr. Lewson in my sparkling wine exam a couple of weeks ago. So I wish this had been 3 weeks ago and I might have maybe got the question right, but it's just so delicious. And I think it's probably quite different to, we talk quite a lot at our tastings about Cremant and Cava and, you know, alternatives to champagne with traditional method sparkling. But I think this just brings a totally fresh approach probably for a lot of our customers.
Yeah. It's always a very big surprise, and some like more in champagne as well. Some like more the Pinot Noir, the Blanc de Noir, the full-bodied creamy stuff, and some like more the Blanc de Blanc, the minerality-driven elegant stuff. So there is always a different range of possibilities you have with sparkling. But I think in that quality with Riesling grapes, it's really something unique, because it's not easy. In the beginning, when our former winemaker, Mathieu Kaufmann, started to produce Riesling sparkling, his colleagues, he came from Champagne. He was working 12 years in Champagne as head winemaker for Bollinger. So all his former colleagues said, Mathieu, it's not possible to produce a top sparkling with Riesling grapes, because they get this old and overripe touch, and yeah, it's not pleasant. You need Pinot grapes, you need Chardonnay. And I think we made a point with that product. Of course, it's possible. It's something really unique. So it's up to everybody else to taste it, whether you like it or not. But I think it's really a unique combination with that freshness and the aroma profile, yeah.
Yeah, it is rare to find sparkling Riesling, and usually it clashes with those autolytic characteristics. I assume this doesn't go through any mallow before the second fermentation.
No, not at all. We want to keep the acidity. That's also two possibilities, especially in Champagne. Some producers make malolactic fermentation, some don't. For the Riesling especially, it wouldn't make sense. Why pick Riesling grapes with that nice, lively acidity and then reduce it in the cellar with technical methods? So we take the natural acidity of the Riesling grapes and start then the second fermentation. Yeah.
In terms of the sparkling wine you produce, somebody's asked a question, are they all vintage wines, or do you make a non-vintage version? I mean, do you have reserve wines that you would blend in?
Yes, we have the Riesling, what we have to taste today on the table, and the Pinot Noir Rosé, which is both vintage and 100% one grape variety. We also have a product which is quite the opposite system, quite the opposite composition. It is with reserve wines, and it's two different grape varieties, Chardonnay and Pinot Blanc. And it's a number of several vintages where you always blend in a little bit of the oldest vintage. And the name of that is Reserve Brut. So we have both philosophies. For the Riesling, it's always vintage and always one grape variety. Yeah.
I think it's important for people to remember that there is a lot of Sekt produced, but none of it is as good as this.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, it's getting better, and also with the opportunities like the celebration of wine, summer of wine, and events like that, it's for me very important that we have the possibility to present the wines and let people taste the wines and get the feedback, because a couple of years ago, if you offered somebody a German Sekt, it was more a threat than an invitation. People were like, oh, do I have to? The first experiences were more like, yeah, the cheap stuff from the supermarkets and more the poor qualities, tank fermentation, and nothing precious, nothing you want to remember, or you want to bring a bottle to your next invitation with friends or something. But it's getting better, and the knowledge about is spread, and more and more people taste the wines, and that's the important thing. They come back, they want another bottle, they see the quality, what is possible, and that's really, for us, it's important to get the feedback, and I'm happy that it's mostly very positive.
Are
I
more
think
and more producers doing traditional method then? Has the tank method started to fall away?
No, it's still the main part of the German Sekt. What you see is that more and more private run wineries, good quality wineries like von Buhl, family owned businesses, they are starting more and more to produce their own high quality sparklings. The brand names and the mass production, that's still, I would say it's more than 90% of the production in Germany is still tank fermentation and easygoing stuff. So there's a lot of domestic market in Germany. Nobody knows it. We are world champions in drinking bubbles. So the highest consumption of sparklings overall per person in the world is Germany, because we love to celebrate, and nobody believes that, but it is.
Which is probably why we don't see the Sekt over here, is because you've drunk it all.
And we really started the first year, we started with the domestic market because that's the most important part. But of course, we are really happy to see that the wines are appreciated in more and more export markets as well. And yeah, so after a couple of years, we now made sure that we have enough to share it with the world.
How do you see the kind of future of sparkling wine for Germany? Because I was going to mention the consumption rates, as people don't automatically associate Germany with sparkling wine, but there is such a huge domestic consumption. It's such a high rate, as you mentioned. Do you think maybe that association for customers in the UK might change? Do you think more people will start kind of exporting higher quality Sekt?
I think so. And to be honest, my impression is that the very good qualities and the English sparklings are more or less creating interest in top quality sparklings beside champagne. So maybe people first try English sparkling because it's from your home country, it's from your area. Maybe you want to see what is possible in your neighborhood or in your country, and then they realize there's no champagne outside Champagne, but there are other very good bubbles, and that is also creating an interest in other traditional bottle fermented Sekt like Franciacorta or top class cavas, and also German Sekt. So I see the demand and the interest in German Sekt increasing in the UK, definitely. Yeah, and I see it in the numbers.
Probably straight after this tasting finishes.
Have you experimented with any sparkling wine from any of your GG sites? Have you tried making any of those single vineyard Sekt?
We have. It's still, I'm sorry, Frank, it's still hidden in the cellar. I know what you're asking for, the Pechstein 2013. Yeah, no, I still don't get my hands on those. We will release Prestige Rosé, we will release a Prestige Blanc de Blanc. But for the single vineyard Rieslings, I'm afraid we have to wait a little longer. Yeah. But there's something hidden in the cellar. I promise you, one of the first bottles. I write your name on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. What you see in the pictures, also a little bit about the climate maybe and the area, Pfalz. So Riesling, of course, is the classic cool climate grape variety, both Riesling and Pinot Noir. And compared to southern France or Spain or southern Italy, of course, Germany overall is a cool climate, and that's why Riesling is there at home and grows there perfectly, because Riesling grapes need a certain duration for the ripening period. So if the weather is too warm, you pick the grapes in July and the aroma profile is not as complex as the potential is. So you want to have more or less a cool climate, but also you see that Pfalz is in Germany one of the warmer wine regions. We have these almond trees, we have a lot of fig trees. Somebody called it the German Tuscany, but it shows a little bit. It's one of Baden and Pfalz are the two warmest wine regions. And what you can get if you work carefully in the vineyards and if you have a good soil management and low yields and a vital soil and vital plants, you get enough concentration in the grape itself and you don't have to lean on sugar levels. So what you really can do in our area is dry wines, dry Riesling, and of course the Sekt also is brut. So but you need that, you need the aroma, you need a heart in the wine, then you don't have to lean on sugar levels. Yeah.
Okay, shall we move on to the Spatburgunder?
Yep. So this is always especially with wine dinners, the big surprise. Everybody expects Reichsrat von Buhl to produce top Riesling, so nothing less. And the Sekt is now better known, more and more appreciated, and the knowledge about that is more and more better. But the last couple of years, it started that people realized first there's German red wine, not only beer, but also red wine in Germany. And then Pinot Noir from Reichsrat von Buhl, Spatburgunder. Spatburgunder is just the German expression, the German term for Pinot Noir. It's the same grape, but it's called Spatburgunder in Germany, not Pinot Noir. And for me, it's the red equivalent to Riesling. It's always the elegant grape variety. Pinot Noir, more important to stay drinkable, to stay fresh, to enjoy a second glass, to be a good food partner. It's never just muscles without brain. A good Pinot Noir should be elegant and delicate and with a certain freshness. So let's see if that worked. If we manage to have all these things.
I think if you go through my staff account, this is probably my most purchased wine.
Mm-hmm. Super.
And if you go through our events catalogue, it's our most put on events wine as well.
Yeah, you told me after the celebration last year, I think it was one of the best selling red wines, which is a couple of years ago, it would be a really big surprise, but now it's changing a little bit. I think you get from that Spätburgunder, from that Pinot Noir, everything you want to have from an elegant red wine. And Pinot Noir needs that combination. The first impression for us, it's important. It's 100% fermented in wooden barrels. So around 70% is tonneau, 500 liter, and 30% is barrique, 225. It's all French oak. and it's around 50% new oak, and the rest is second and third used. So what we don't want to have is the oak in the front. That's the reason why we only take 50% new wood. First impression is definitely the cherry fruit, the grape itself. And then there's something earthy, and that's Pinot Noir. It's like always with the nose in the fruits and standing on the forest soil. So having that combination, a little bit mushrooms, a little bit earthy touch, and in the finish also that hint of the barrique storage. So it's around 14 months in wood before it's then bottled. But everything in a very balanced way. So I hope I'm right when I say there's not one layer of flavors in the front. So it's like reading a book, something else, coming, especially with a little bit air then. This is vintage 20, what you see here in the bucket. So this is, and also in the vineyards. So this is the grapes we harvested this year, and we'll have on the bottle in 2 or 3 years. So it needs a little bit time in the cellar. Fermentation on the skin, like you see there, is around 15 to 20 days. So a little bit more than 2 up to 3 weeks. And then small malolactic fermentation for the red wines, and then storage in tonneaux and barriques. So
how was the 2020 vintage?
Really good, really good. So a warm summer again, like the previous 2 years, but not as brutal as 18 and 19. September was perfect. The nights started to be a little bit cooler. During the days it was dry, it was sunny. So you see how healthy the grapes are. And Pinot Noir is a tricky grape variety. It really catches easily any infections, and it's hard to get these healthy, perfect grapes from Pinot Noir every year. But 2020, it was really easy to get them. 16, what we have in the glass right now, was also a cooler year. It was not one of these extreme hot years, which brings in front the elegance of the wine. You read very often, even before the harvest, in these warm summers, or this will be the vintage of the century and best wine ever hanging out there in the vineyards. But to be honest, with the climate change the last couple of years, it's getting harder to manage to get enough freshness and elegance in the cellar. So we have these grapes, Pinot Noir and Riesling, for cool climate wines. And we manage by deciding the picking time year for year in different start of the harvest. So like 2013 we started the harvest at the same day we finished in 2018. So these are 2 extreme examples. And 16 was a cooler year, easier to have the elegance, because very often the vintage ratings are always the warmest years get the highest ratings, which I don't really get, because very often, for me personally, elegance is more important than just muscles. And it's easier to have in these cooler years elegant wines, and I think 16, what we have in the glass, is a very good example. and 18 was also very good grapes. It started a little bit raining then during October, but the Pinot harvest we have managed to finish before the rain, to get it in the cellar in a good condition and early enough.
Other than,
in terms of,
sorry, go on, Louise.
I was going to say, I was probably asking the same question. In terms of climate change that you mentioned, is it just kind of the hotter years that you're seeing? Are there any other fluctuations? I mean, is it making it more unpredictable in terms of the weather? And I'm wondering if there's anything that you're already starting to think about or put into place in the winery and the vineyard as well to kind of counteract any negative or perhaps positive effects.
It's something we definitely see the last couple of years. It's not like every year is warmer than the previous, but overall the climate change is something you just have to accept and face, and end of the day to embrace and work with it. So what are we doing is, like I said, the timing of the harvest. We pick, compared to 30 years ago, I would say a month earlier, or we start to harvest a month earlier. We do a selective hand harvest, which means you really go through the same vineyards several times, 2-3 times, pick the perfect grapes at that time, give the rest a little bit more time to ripen further, come back again, harvest the perfect grapes. So it's a long-lasting, complete, regarding organization of the harvest, it's a nightmare, but the result is quite good. So you start earlier, but you finish more or less at the same time than a couple of years ago. Then also soil management is very important, and the yield. So we have low yields. We don't try to have the maximum amount of grapes in the vineyards. The average yield for von Buhl is 50-55 hectoliters per hectare, which is 50% of what would be allowed for quality wine. So we only want to have the best concentrated grapes, and it's also for the balance of the plant of the vine itself important. So it's like driving a car. If you always speed, maximum speed, it breaks earlier. And if you try to get out of the nature of the soil and of the plants everything you can possibly yield, you catch infections, the soil is getting tired, the quality suffers over the year. And with the climate change, and von Buhl is in the lucky position, that's one of our biggest treasures. Von Buhl is in the lucky position. We have the perfect vineyards in that fillet between the flat areas, which are getting really towards the Rhine. There it's getting really, really too warm now. It's really hard to get elegant wines from these plains. And in the back are the mountains. In the west, behind us are the mountains, protecting us from a lot of rain. And right in the middle, the fillet, you can imagine it's a little bit like regarding the landscape, like in Côte d'Or. So between the flat areas and the mountains, that center, that fillet, that's where we have our vineyards. And 60% of the vineyards at von Buhl are rated Premier and Grand Cru. And you need really a good soil, and you need a good microclimate, and you need a good leaf management in the plants to then come in the end home with healthy grapes like that. And every year is different. So, but overall, of course, we start earlier now.
I know that a lot of your vineyards, your kind of owned vineyards, farm organically. In one of the conversations we had last night, another presenter was saying that it seems to them that, you know, in Chablis, it was the vineyards that farm organically tend to have good production, even if the vintage isn't, you know, ideal conditions, it always tends to be the vineyards that farm organically that tend to be the most successful. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because I don't think that organic is the only reason for that. So you work carefully, and most of the organic wine growers have these low yields and they have a good soil management. And the trick or the idea of organic wine growing is to be that step ahead. So you don't wait until your plants catch any infections and then you treat it with chemicals. It's exactly the other way around. If you work organic, you have to be one step ahead and you make sure that your plants stay vital enough not to catch these infections. And that's the secret why the grapes of organic wine growing, especially in complicated years when you have a lot of botrytis or infections or something, very often, I totally agree, the organic vineyards look much better. But also because they don't have that maximum yield. It's an important part of natural wine growing. Yeah.
So it's just the kind of enforced attention to detail that organic farming requires, that just means you're always being proactive rather than reactive, as Mimi says.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not like the organic farmer sits on the couch and drinks a glass of wine and let nature gets along. So you're more often in the vineyards. You have to make sure that you strengthen your plants as good as possible and protect them from any infections. And also the soil, it's really, the soil is the basic for everything later. So from a poor and tired soil, you will never get vital plants and vital grapes. So everything starts with the roots and the plants and the vineyards. And of course, then you have to do a good work as well with the leaf management. So enough green with the climate change, that the grapes are not sunburned and so on. So you work a little bit different, maybe compared to 15 years ago. But if you watch nature carefully and if you try to see all details and always one step ahead, then you manage to get the good results. And I really think when you should come to Pfalz and we walk through the vineyards, because when I have visitors, I love to go through the vineyards and you can see the difference, which is organic and which is non-organic.
Just hold on 1 second. I'm just going to book my flight now.
Yeah, me too. Count me in. Sounds good.
Could you describe the difference, in your opinion, of, say, Burgundy Pinot Noir versus a German Pinot Noir?
It depends very much on the winemaker, of course. There are some German producers that really follow the French style, the Burgundy style, in a very good way. There are some top producers that really can compare with top Burgundies. What we are doing, well, it's the same in Burgundy. You have Bourgogne AOC, which you can drink quite early, a couple of years after the bottling, and you have, from some producers, Premier Crus, you need to store 30 years because before it's makes really sense to open it. So I would say it depends on the type. If I would compare our Pinot Noir Spatburgunder and the Bourgogne AOC, So a non-single vineyard, Bourgogne AOC on our Spätburgunder. This one has definitely more freshness. So, but that's our style at Von Buhl. There are also some German producers that reduce completely the acidity. So I would say that's the Von Buhl style. We want to have that drinkability and that freshness for the whites and for the reds as well. We are closer to France regarding the style than to New World. So we are not 100% fruit dominated. If you would see the extremes like New Zealand fruit-driven style and Pinot Noir Old World style, we are closer to France, but we are something different. We don't want to copy Burgundy. They have their own good wines, so we don't need to copy that.
And have you been experimenting with any single vineyard Pinot Noir?
Not so far. No, it's only 8% of our vineyards. So if we now would start to separate the single vineyards, you would really end up with 1 tonneau of this vineyard and 2 tonneaus of that vineyard. I think that would be marketing-wise a little bit a nightmare, because you never know ahead which one is the bigger demand and so on. And you couldn't fulfill the demand at all. So that's the reason why we have one Pinot Noir blend. And I don't see that we start producing single vineyards Pinot in the future. So for Von Buhl, for us, that is the strength and the potential from the winery for the Rieslings. We have 8 Grand Cru Rieslings vineyards and 5 Premier Crus. So we have 13 single vineyards for top Rieslings. And yeah, maybe we should do what we can do best, single vineyard Riesling. And for the Pinot with our small spots, we always try to find a good balance between the different aspects. You have one spot where you have a little bit more limestone, a little bit more chalky soils, and you combine that with a sandstone terroir. So you bring together in our Spätburgunder and our Pinot Noir the different terroir aspects of our region. So that's why I would compare it with Bourgogne AOC. It's more like Pfalz than single vineyard. No.
In terms of the challenges you might have faced this year with COVID, is there anything that you found has come out of the process that might have been positive in the way that you work together, or was it kind of just been a challenge in terms of sales and marketing and, you know, being able to visit places?
For me, it was not very complicated. So I think we all can learn something. Usually in an average year, I drive 50,000 kilometers a year, and that's not really, it doesn't make sense. I realized why am I driving around all the time? A lot of meetings, especially business-wise, I learned you can do via the computer. The travels, of course, I miss. That's the best part of my job. So being in the different countries, but overall for me it was not a problem. We managed in the whole team to have not one infection, but we had our home office time, we had our lockdown in April, May, and we have now the light lockdown. Except the vineyard team, you can't explain nature what a virus, what COVID-19 is. So of course, my colleagues in the vineyards, they continue to work the whole year. Very heartbreaking for me is to see how the on-trade suffers. So seeing now the restaurants, the wine bars, the pubs, the hotels, that they have to close again. Especially for family-run businesses, so it's really, really a tough time. And if on-trade, if restaurants are suffering, for us as a winery, it's, we are affected. We can balance it with more consumer sales, with web shop sales, with some export markets. So we will survive. I don't want to complain, but sometimes it's hard to see. It's a difficult year. It's really a challenging year. But the most important thing is to make sure that everybody, what you can do to keep one more person healthy, you should do. It's very easy. Yeah. And we all do it.
We can still share a nice glass of wine.
Yes. Yes, that's totally right. So yeah, stay home, drink some wine, save some lives.
Exactly. And I think for us, it's, although, we're used to having our big celebration of wine and you get lots more people able to come and see you, this is a much more personal level. And, engaging with producers and customers on this level is a really different dynamic, I think. And I've really enjoyed listening to you speak this evening. It's just, good opportunity for us to be able to put the questions to you on such a personal level and, connect our customers in this way that are dotted around the country. And I think in terms of the recording that we've got, it's going to be something that I'm going to be putting up on YouTube and telling a lot of people to watch, because there's just a fantastic amount of information that you've just shared with us, which I think will be new for a lot of people.
Thank you very much. So it was for me a great pleasure to be there. And I also think that it is a different way, but there are some qualities in having these tastings. I see this, I totally agree. So it was a great pleasure and great fun to taste the wines with all of you together. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Monica. It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks for having me.
Learn even more about German wine.
Was there something you didn't know, Frank?
I always want to learn more when it comes to Riesling. Come on.
And we will. It's sometimes it's really like with our winemakers dinner. There's, I don't know what's wrong there, but we will manage. We find a possibility to do it.
But the greatest thing for that is I had already ordered over all the wine. So whenever we do it, we're going to have beautifully mature drink wine. Even if we can't do it for 10 years, those wines are going to be fantastic.
Yeah. Just make sure that you don't drink it until we have the date.
I was going to say there's always a danger of that.
No,
Louis, maybe you lock these cases down.
I mean, I wouldn't trust me either, to be honest. I've caught the Riesling bug.
Okay, super duper.